Bruchim Habaim. Blessed are we who come here in God's name. We are here to pay tribute to remember the life of Steve Feller. Shiviti Adonai, lenegdi tamid, ki mimini bal ehemot. Lachen samach libi, v'yagen libo. Lachen samach libi, v'yagel kivodi, af besari yishkon lavetach. Ki lo tazov nafshi lishol, lo titen chasidcha lirot shachat todieni. Orach hayim, orach hayim. Sova samachot et panecha, neimot b'mincha netzach. Shiviti Adonai, lenegdi tamid, ki mimini bal ehemot. I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side, I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exult, and my soul rejoice. My being is secure. For you will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful ones see destruction. You show me the path of life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift. Death has taken our beloved Steve Feller. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence, there is lamentation. In their tears, there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For Steve's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever, for his companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of his heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. In this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that brings us the ever new message of God's nearness. It tells of our kinship with the Creator, in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. I'd like to invite up Pastor Jane from Coe College here to lead us in the 23rd Psalm.
Along with President Hayes and the entire Coe College community, we offer our deepest condolences and sympathy to Barbara and the entire family. We are heartbroken with you. May we take comfort in the words of the 23rd Psalm. God is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures. God leads me beside still waters and restores my soul. God, you lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever.
L'chol zman ve'et l'chol chafetz tachat hashemayim. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek, a time to lose, a time to keep, a time to discard, a time to tear, and a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak. Leida hi reshit uftira tachlit. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. But life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness and often back again, from health to sickness and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Leida hi reshit uftira tachlit. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. But life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage made stage by stage, from birth to death to life everlasting. Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai mivorach. In his sorrow, Job cried out, God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. An ancient people, we are well acquainted with grief and with the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us, yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave and that there is strength in faith. With Job, we say, Adonai natan, God, you have given. You gave us a loved one who will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in his life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai lakach. But God, you have also taken away. We pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and love and are able to say, Yehi Shem Adonai mivorach. Blessed be the name of God, now and forever. We're going to take a moment now to offer our own silent prayer, our own private thoughts about the life of Steve Feller. As you can imagine, Steve was well-loved in this community, and there were a lot of people who wanted to speak here at his funeral. We are going to have a few people share some of their stories about Steve. First, his best friend, Harry Sinkus, is going to come up, and then a former student and a colleague of his, Sandeep Giri, and following him, the president of Coe College, David Hayes, is going to share some remarks. So, Harry first.
I'm honored to be here today. This is extremely difficult. Please bear with me. My kids call me Sappy Pappy. I cry at everything. I cry at every wedding I have ever been to. I even cried at a wedding my wife took me to where I didn't know the bride or the groom. I swear to God. So this certainly is not an easy thing for me to speak. But I've known Steve for 74 years. And I'll talk about not his last 46 years here at Coe College. There's more people who can speak to that and with better stories and whatnot. But let me tell you a little about the boy who grew up to be here. I've known him, I've told people, since he was in the womb. His mother and my mother went to high school together. And I was 11 months older, so I know my mom let his mother hold me in her arms when he was pregnant. So that was my first introduction to Steve. Steve lived, his mother had moved away. I grew up in upstate New York. His mother moved down to Brooklyn where Steve was born. But Steve would come up to Utica every summer to stay with his beloved grandma, Pearl. And so we spent our summers growing up together and experiencing those summers. A lot of things you don't know about this remarkable man. You know, early in life, we would watch our mothers and his grandmother sit around the kitchen table playing penny ante poker. And the love for poker developed from those moments. We learned pinochle and board games. During the pandemic, we used to play Trivia Pursuit over Zoom. Baseball. We played wiffle ball in the backyard. Steve, nor I, not too many Jewish young boys are born with athletic talent, and we were no exceptions. But we loved baseball. And Steve was what I considered an obnoxious Yankee fan. I'm somewhat of a contrarian, so I was a Red Sox fan. And we had a lot of fun arguing the merits of the teams, and I lost a lot of bets in those early years. And I would say to Steve, oh, what a great rivalry. And he would say, rivalry? Is a hammer and a nail a rivalry? But I got back, finally. That love for baseball, Steve and I went down to Brooklyn one summer and spent time with them. And back in those days, 1964, 14 years old, he was 13, and his mom let us ride the subway out to Shea Stadium. Can you imagine that, letting a 13 or 14-year-old today on the subway in New York City? Those days, unfortunately, aren't here right now. But we saw that game, the hapless New York Mets against the Philadelphia Phillies. And there's some older people in this who might remember the name Jim Bunning, the pitcher for the Philadelphia Phillies who went on later in his career, I think was state senator in Pennsylvania. But that day, he pitched the perfect game. 90 pitches, 27 batters up, 27 batters down. It was just crazy. That's the first Major League Baseball game I saw in person. The Mets set a record for the least hits in a doubleheader. They played daytime doubleheaders back there. Two. Most boring second game, but we continued to enjoy baseball. And I don't know if the family told you that, when they gathered out in Denver to say goodbye, one of the last things Ray, Heidi, Barb did was sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." How fitting. In the 7th grade, I sat next to this young, attractive girl who had just moved to Utica, Barb Feller. She was the second girl I ever dated in my life. But at that age, what do you know, what's that mean? What it meant is we became lifelong friends. And in high school, one of the other girls sitting at our 4 desks that were pushed together, Linda Ellenberger, now Spiewak, had a jukebox on her back porch, and she was going to have a sock hop party. This is, 65, 60? And I said, oh, my best friend is in from Brooklyn for the summer. Can I bring him? They said, sure, absolutely. So Steve came over in my house, and he was dressed in his usual sartorial excellence. I had to give him some clothes because I was, I was worried he was colorblind. I'm colorblind, but no, he's not colorblind. He just has bad taste. But Steve met Barb at that party. Barb was the only girl Steve ever dated. Years have gone by, and I never was jealous of Steve taking Barb. It's not that he took her away. We were friends. But it was like, this is great. I have 2 friends for life together. It was incredible. Steve was the best man at their wedding. Steve was the best man. Am I? I don't know how many people realize how fast Steve could move. One time when we were down in Brooklyn, we went to, a little neighborhood hangout place with his posse. And 54th and Flatbush, I think it was that. And evidently the other group of young teenagers didn't really appreciate us coming into their ground. And it was the first and only time in my life that I can say we were mugged. But Steve led us out of that place and led the pack up the street and away. He was fast. And in fact, I don't know how many people know this, he ran track in high school. It was kind of amazing, but he's put on a few pounds over the years, and so be it. We've celebrated so many celebrations, so many events. Our kids being born, being bar mitzvahed, being married, having grandchildren. So many memories. He has 2 wonderful, wonderful daughters. Chips off the old block. Both doctorates. Mathematics, psychology. Steve loved Heidi being able to talk about teaching and being a professor. And Heidi, Steve and I used to often play poker. When he went to Brown University to get his doctorate down in Providence, I lived south of Boston at that time, and he'd come up for poker games. And that was probably the one thing I could honestly say I could beat Steve at, consistently. That's about the only thing. But he passed that love for poker. He's warned me, don't play cards with Ray. The other thing he passed along to Ray was the love for numismatics. Steve and I started off collecting pennies and nickels and going through pocket change and going into the bank, getting rolls and rolls of change, looking for, that hidden find. And, and today, I think he's got the world's 2nd best collection of war camp money. And published author with Ray, giving lectures, just, that started with a few pockets of change. Um, we, and I can't go on without mentioning Barb. There's a reason Steve was successful. Behind every successful man, there's something driving him, something giving him serenity and peace and letting his mind, his skill, do what's necessary. And Barb has been there forever. They traveled the world together. And Barb, you're a treasure. You're a treasure. There's, he's touched so many lives. Look at all the people here. If you gave him a week, Jewish tradition wouldn't bury people quite as quick. This auditorium, we would need 3 times to fill it for all the people this man's touched in his life. There's a word in Yiddish, mensch. It means a man of the highest integrity. I know of no better example than Steve Feller. And despite all his successes, he was still that little Stevie I grew up with. Humble and focused, determined, always determined. And but I want to thank everyone for coming, and we need to keep his memory alive. Certainly in the short term, people are going to remember him. How can you not? But I've already met with Deborah Green here on campus, and we will be establishing an endowed scholarship in his name, and it'd be open to anyone who wants to contribute to it, so that we can continue to develop the brilliant minds of with physics. And it's funny, science was not my forte. And in fact, it was because of physics that I have my successful career. And that was because when I took physics in my senior year in high school, within 3 days, I knew I had to drop the class. And I went down to the guidance counselor and said, look, I don't need physics to get into college. What do you have? She said, what time is the class? She goes, well, there's auto mechanics. I said, I'm a good Jewish boy. I'm mechanically declined. No, that's not going to work. She goes, what about accounting and bookkeeping? Accounting and bookkeeping? I don't know what that is, but it's math. I love math. Okay. So I went and became an accountant. I had an extremely successful career as, I retired 10 years ago. I was a chief financial officer of a New York Stock Exchange company. And Steve and I had so many discussions over the years about careers, about colleges. I served, and still am, on the board of trustees of Utica University. So Steve and I would talk about the unfortunate state of colleges, universities today with decreasing enrollment and the need to raise funds to keep these doors open to train the next generation and the generation following that. So I probably could ramble on for a long time, but other people want to tell you their stories. Thank you for coming. I love Steve, and he will be missed. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. This will be very hard for me. I should give you What's up? I met Doc, like a lot of students here, as a teenager. I was an immigrant from India. I was quite lost and kind of clueless, huge culture shock coming here to Cedar Rapids. And Doc kind of took me under his wing. He taught me many things. He taught me the culture here. He taught me how to do physics research, author papers. And one short story, my interest was in computer science, and after a couple conversations with Doc, I became a physics major. And he made many personal phone calls to get me the internships and work under other professors, and I ended up working at national labs, none of which would have been possible if Doc did not pick up the phone and made very personal phone calls. He helped me get into the grad school of my choice, and it's safe to say, really, that I could not have the career in life without Doc. I have no doubt in my mind. Aside from academics, we became very close friends. We debated for hours, including his very last day, about philosophy, politics, sports, religion. He invited me into his home and family. I was an international student with no family, no relatives here. And every Thanksgiving, I was in your home. Barbara, Heidi, Rachel, thank you. And I still call them every Thanksgiving to remember that. You fed me a lot. He also taught me the fundamentals of baseball, a sport that's new to me. And over 20 years later, I returned the favor and taught him the fundamentals of cricket. I took him to a cricket game in a town called Nottingham in England last year, and we watched England versus West Indies, a great cricket match. And somebody talked about running. We were going to miss the train, and that's the fastest I've seen him run. He kept telling me in the stadium while we were watching the game, my family was there with him, that cricket, this is the close cousin of baseball. And I corrected him, Doc, wrong relationship, it's the father of baseball. He even came to my home in California. We ate food together. Food was one of his passions. He loved spices and all kinds of food. Hearing him talk about New York pizza is like the best thing in the world. And he would say, Sandeep, the greasier it is, the better it is. When I heard he was sick, I knew I wanted to go see him. Something in me was pulling him there. I dropped everything, and I flew in to go see him in Denver. And I will forever cherish spending 3 days with him up until the day of his surgery. He even put me to work. He made me give him a shave. He didn't like how his beard was looking in the hospital. He told me he liked it so much, the hot towel treatment, he said, you could do this for a living, Sandeep. His other love was, of course, physics, and then baseball. On his very last day of the surgery, we watched the game A League of Their Own on my laptop, and he cried through the movie. For those of you who've seen the movie, I believe it may have been his favorite movie. His three loves were physics, baseball, and food, and somebody talked about the history of money, the fourth love. And I asked him, Doc, if you had to choose between three, the very last day, how would you rank them? He said, it's like you asking me to choose between my children and grandchildren. And I believe Coe College should do something to honor these three loves that Doc had. This loss will definitely hit me hard and leave a hole in my life. I just like many of you, Doc genuinely touched my life. For those of you who have not had a student-professor relationship like this, it will be very hard for you to understand. This is not a normal relationship. It really isn't. I'll end with one story. This happened about 22 years ago. Like I mentioned, I was an immigrant and I was financially struggling. And I was terribly behind in my fees. And I walked into Doc's office and I told him my situation. I was not being allowed to register for classes or housing. And Doc started making phone calls, first to the budget team, the finance team, then to the dean, and they all said it's the president's call, and eventually to the president. And long story short, after a 2-hour conversation with Jim Pfeiffer, then president, I was able to register and go on to complete college, and then have this career that I do building products in Silicon Valley. When I would walk the hallways of Peterson Hall, Doc would say loudly to me, "Sandeep, you owe me." I'm here to confirm today, I still owe Doc. And Doc, thank you for everything you have done for me. You know what you have done for me, and I know. And I will be paying off that debt the best I can for the rest of my life. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It is with a heavy heart and a deep sense of responsibility that I speak for all of the college today as we honor a life that ended too soon. But it is essential that we fully reflect upon and celebrate a man whose life shaped this institution in ways that will be felt for generations. To Barbara, Heidi, and Ray, Heather and I, and this entire community, offer our deepest condolences and continuing support. To Steve's many Coe colleagues, particularly in the physics department, please know that this community is walking with you as we navigate the coming days together with collective strength and care. Dr. Steve Feller was many things to Coe. He was a teacher, a mentor, a scholar, a colleague, and a friend. But the genius of his gift was that in each of these roles, Doc was a force of nature. And it is difficult for me to imagine this place without the presence he brought to this campus for more than 4 decades. Steve was gifted with a mind that never seemed to rest. His curiosity pushed far beyond physics into glass sciences, international research networks, literature, poker, at least once to my expense, never again, the study of coinage and barter trade, and for a brief period, the somewhat misguided idea that he might be an actor when he roped one of our theater faculty into staging the play Copenhagen together with Steve in the role of Bohr. And for bonus points, thanks to Mario, I'll add that he drafted Barbara into the role of Margarita Bohr, his wife, on stage. He loved ideas, discovery. More importantly, he loved arguing about ideas and discovery. Learning was sheer joy. Being around Doc meant being pulled into that energy and thus reminded that knowledge is far more than scholarship. For Steve modeled a life steered by the habits of a critical mind in pursuit of wisdom beyond knowledge. To say he had a passion would understate the truth. Steve approached life with a zeal and zest that was infectious. His joy for baseball, good food, and even better company that might gather around a table to enjoy that food were always on top of his mind. He embraced travel and shared that love freely, opening doors around the globe for Coe students long before global learning was a common practice. Beyond world travel, his sense of place extended to his adopted state of Iowa, and he would bring students every year to the Field of Dreams and to the bridges of Madison County, usually making them watch the film or read a book before they got in the van. That included trips to pizza places spread throughout the Midwest that he would endorse as very good, but not quite as good as what you would find in New York City. His greatest zeal was reserved for his students. He is the gold standard of a student-centered professor, putting their needs and priorities over his own. Not on limited occasions or as one-offs, but at every turn and opportunity. He saw their potential before they saw it in themselves, and he pushed them to heights many never imagined. The long list of alumni who earned doctorates, built research careers in industry, or found confidence in their academic lives because of him is simply staggering. His impact, therefore, is not measured in the work he published, although it was extensive, but rather in the lives of people he lifted, encouraged, and launched into careers and futures that will bear his imprint for generations. An ancient adage brought around again by the street artist Bansky. Plus, it's that you die twice, once when you take your last breath, and again when someone says your name for the last time. I propose a different measure for our friend Steve, and instead that suggests that we look to the expansive academic family tree he leaves behind. His former students are today reviewing dissertations of their own students, creating, innovating, building, and teaching. And so long as this thought line to Steve's research and discovery continues across generations, we will continue to know of Doc and his gift to his students, colleagues, and many friends. Steve was loyal. Loyal to Coe and our mission that brought him here. Loyal to his family, who grounded him and brought so much joy. Loyal to the faith that shaped his understanding of purpose and service. That devotion and fidelity gave him a steadiness that students felt when they encountered him, when they needed guidance, and to us as colleagues when we felt we needed that support. I felt it too. He was a mentor to me and one of the first faculty members here at Coe to make sure he knew, or that I knew, he believed in me. That kind of loyalty changes a person. It certainly changed me. He was also unguarded in the best possible way. A stranger could sit with Doc for a half hour and learn his story, hear his loves and his passions, and begin to understand the world as he saw it. In that manner, he was quite the open book. But beneath the surface was a rich complexity, shaped by his childhood, his scholarship, his travels, and his faith. That complexity made him compelling and captivating. His openness made him beloved. There are many giants in the history of this college, but Steve stands in a very small circle among them, pardon me. His work helped place Coe on the world stage in a way that few could have imagined when he came to Coe. He secured millions in research support that transformed opportunities for our students. He pushed Coe to reach higher, think bigger, and believe that a small college in Cedar Rapids could compete with anyone, anywhere. And then he proved it time and time again. Today's grief over loss must be overcome with our celebration of a life that gave more than it ever asked for. Steve's legacy is not of a single achievement. It is the aggregate of the thousands of moments in classrooms, laboratories, offices, airports, restaurants, and conversations where he gave his time, his belief, and his heart to others. His life is a reminder that greatness is measured in how we serve, lift, and love other people. I am blessed for the privilege of calling him a mentor and a friend. I am grateful for the countless ways he shaped the lives of our students and alumni and the future of this college. And I'm grateful for the example that he leaves for all of us. May we honor his memory by living with curiosity, loyalty, kindness, and zest. May we carry forward the work he loved. May we hold Coe and ourselves to a standard and expectation of excellence, seeking to continually advance the college for the benefit of our students. And may his family find comfort in knowing that he lives on in the thousands of students and alumni whose lives bear his fingerprints. I wish you all luck, courage, and Godspeed in the days ahead. Thank you for receiving these remarks, and God bless Steve Feller.
I'd now like to invite up Steve's wife, Barbara, and his children, Heidi and Ray, who would also like to share a few thoughts about him.
All right. So at age 17, I knew one thing with certainty. I was not going to Coe College. And I think it's amazing how sophomoric a senior can be, you know. I'd grown up at Coe, albeit hiding under my dad's office desk for most of that time. And because I was scared of interacting with people. And I'd even completed a summer worth of research with him after I'd finished AP chemistry in my high school. So I thought I knew all I needed to know about Coe and my dad. And then a friend of mine said she wanted to go on a tour of Coe, and I said I would go with her as a joke. And there I was, the beginning of the tour that I probably could have given, although it would have included, again, my dad's bottom of his desk where I would hide all the time growing up. And I realized in about 15 minutes that actually I did belong here, in no small part because of my dad. I realized he'd had a good life here, and maybe I could have a good fit as well. But I was worried, very worried. Actually, one of his colleagues actually tried to talk me out of coming here, saying I needed to spread my wings and experience my own, life and opportunities, and, I should go somewhere farther from home, that sort of thing. So my biggest fear, in part based on this conversation with the colleague, but, also based on myself, was that how would I find myself? My dad is a larger-than-life person. Surely I'll be in his shadow this whole time, and maybe that will be a problem. And my fears felt confirmed upon arrival. I'll just give a few quick anecdotes. There's a tradition at Coe, when you arrive, that you ring the victory bell. And they made a big deal at orientation that you ring the victory bell twice. Exactly twice. And I'm a rule follower because I'm the firstborn. So you ring it once when you arrive as an incoming freshman. You ring it once at graduation as a graduating senior. And they made this big deal about the bell ringing ceremony, and there was a thing where they said, right now you look upon the faculty and they look like robed mystics hovering upon the earth, but over time you'll realize they're just people. And imagine my surprise, perhaps, when one of the robed mystics broke formation and started running towards the bell as I approached the front of the line. And as has been alluded to, he does have a track history and could run. And as I'm ringing the bell, Dad leaps in front of my mom and others who may have had cameras ready. And so the opportunity to take a photo is missed. And then Dad says, "Whoa, all right, Heidi, ring it again." And I was like, "Dad, you ring it twice." So I did not ring it again until graduation, and you can imagine there may have been like 20 photographers at different angles to make sure that Dad couldn't spoil that angle. So. And then there was my first day of general physics in Peterson Hall with Mario. I took it because I needed a lab science, and I was curious, but feeling detached, that kind of thing. And there we were in the first floor of Peterson. This was before my dad had led the charge with the funding to renovate Peterson, so it was dark and quiet at 8 in the morning, you know. And I hear outside the hallway a familiar tread coming my way, slowing as we get to that door. It's the last one on the left before you go upstairs. And then someone stops outside the doors. Mario hasn't even gotten through the syllabus yet, right? And then I hear, "Hi, Heidi." I was like, "Dad, what is happening?" And, you know, I didn't say those words out loud because I was trying to melt. And he's like, "I just had to stop by. Heidi's in physics. She's in college." I was mortified. And so, as a student, you know, I felt like my fears had been confirmed. Until one day, my freshman year, where I went to get a VHS tape, you can look that up in a museum maybe, at the library, and a student was working. I didn't know this student. I still don't know this student. He was working at the library and looked at my ID, and he said, "Feller," as in Doc Feller. And I said something that was probably intended to be intelligent, like, "Well, it's only hereditary." And he said, "If he were my father, I would be so proud to be his child." He said, "I've never had a class with him, and I will never have a class with him. But I'm an international student, and your father is so greatly respected on campus. Generally, but with the international students specifically, he is always welcoming to us. He has us to his house for every opportunity that he can when we need a family, a surrogate family." He said, "You should be proud." And thankfully, this sophomoric freshman listened. And from that moment on, I began to learn from my father in the way that was intended. And here's what I finally realized when I woke up. He believed in being a fanatic. And it's algorithmic, really, how you do this. It's how he structured his research program. It's how he structured his parenting. And so I'm going to take it through with you, step by step, briefly, how to become a fanatic, dad style, based on my own experience. And this led to 12 refereed publications, 3 international conferences, all before I was 22. It's incredible. So, step 1, help with projects. In this phase, you find a mentor, or one is assigned to you. You observe, and you get your feet wet. In my case, I was assigned the indefatigable Danelle Hogan. You couldn't ask for a better mentor, not in my gene pool. She was a legend in the co-physics community. I did everything I could, menial tasks like cleaning crucibles, more important things like preparing samples for the DSC or the pycnometer. When a sample is in the furnace, what do? You write in your lab notebook. You take careful notes. You make sure that you're recording everything. When you're done with that, ask other groups if they need help. Ask questions. So many questions in phase 1. Phase 2, you lead your own project. In this phase, you begin to think you're hot stuff. So I had a project involving lithium borovanadate glasses. In this phase, you begin to mentor others. And then you also have to develop patience because your head is getting a little big. So my dad would say things like, "No, check that again. No, that calculation isn't right. Try it again, try it again, try it again." I thought I was going crazy, right? And even later, years later, after I had published on this, after I had presented on this, my dad went back to my lab notebooks for this project, and he made one of my glasses from it for my wedding, because traditionally in a Jewish ceremony, at the end, you stomp on glass, and he made a lithium borovanadate glass from my notebook. And at my wedding, a beautiful ceremony, very wonderful. At the end, he said, I don't think you wrote in the lab notebook very accurately. You described this glass sample as being pretty stable, but in retrospect, I see now that it's hygroscopic. And I was like, yeah, that is true. So in the phase where you're beginning to lead others, you still have to check yourself. You have to be detail-oriented. You have to be thorough. You have to be careful with how you are communicating that. There is no substitute. Phase 3, to becoming a fanatic. You have to go into the world. In my case, I went to the University of Reading and worked with his longtime colleague, Dr. Adrian Wright, the summer after my junior year. But the point at this phase, literally, is that you are building your own network. You have observed how the process works. You have led your own project, and now it's time to network. Literally collaborate, literally find your people. The opportunities were incredible. And I was just one person that he mentored on this sort of path. Everyone had an opportunity to leave campus and build their network, to find their people, to spread their wings, to see what they were interested in. And I should say that at each step, I felt valued. Any glass that I touched, even when I didn't know what I was doing, even when I didn't record it properly but thought that I was recording it properly, that landed in a publication. My name was on it if I had been involved in any step of the way. Lots of faculty, and I can say this now that I have gone further into the system, would forget the little people that did things like make that one sample that one day. But not my dad. He believed in community, he helped you build your community, and he made sure that you were appreciated for what contributions, big or small, that you had along the way. It was incredible. And so, what I've learned in a 3-step process involving some bending of rules, some arguments and asking questions, some curiosity, is that I was worried about the wrong things when I came here as a first year. How was I going to find myself? Wasn't the question. Somehow, and I'll never know how my dad could do this, he figured out how to help you become yourself, not who people thought he wanted you to be, but really yourself. I didn't major in physics because my dad wanted me to. I didn't get a PhD in math because my dad wanted me to. My dad never helped me with my homework, but he was proud of me every step of the way, even when my path was different from his. And that's his gift. He helps you find yourself, and he makes it look easy, and he argues with you along the way, and he helps you find your people. And I think the thing that hurts the most right now is that now I have to carry that on, and I can't pick up the phone and ask him how to do it. He was incredible, and I will miss him every single day of my life. But I will do what I can to carry on those algorithmic steps to help others move forward. Thank you.
It's hard enough not to cry, but then Heidi, goodness. I just want to say first, thank you to everybody who's here and to everybody who I know is watching via the magic of YouTube technology. I know that includes people all across the world, and I appreciate all the outreach that we've gotten and stories that we've gotten. And those who are here, please write a story before you leave so that we can include that as we compile all of our memories. Okay. My wonderful dad, which is always what I call him, so it's a little hard to say it, was a person with great enthusiasm for the many loves of his life, as has already been alluded and captured very beautifully by Sandeep. my somewhat brother, somewhat replacement, when I left for college and he arrived in my place. One of his loves, you all know, and it's been alluded to, but what is his favorite sport? Baseball. Correct, baseball, most definitely. He would argue that it was the best sport, but I'm not going to get into that one way or the other. But the reason I bring it up is because there's one baseball quote that he referenced a lot. It was from Lou Gehrig's 1939 farewell speech, in which he said, "Today I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth." Now, today in particular, I wish we'd had a little more luck. But overall, my goodness, I'm so lucky too. Now, one time that my dad recently brought up this quote was when we were being interviewed together on a numismatic podcast. I'm sure you've all heard it. It's very popular to listen to numismatic podcasts. One of the topics that came up, which comes up a lot in the collecting community, was the question of how he had convinced me to be interested in collecting when so many people struggle to get their kids interested. And his answer was that quote, which at the time I valued and right now I treasure. But it wasn't luck. That is not what got me interested. And I told them in the podcast that the main reason I got interested was because I liked my dad. When Heidi and I were kids, he would announce that he was headed to a paper money conference somewhere else. And we would not want him to go. And I think we had what I would now reference as sort of Bluey-style shenanigans, where we would try to convince him that he shouldn't go. I remember specifically we would claim that we had just been watching the weather report and that there was going to be a downpour of yellow cheese in Memphis. He hated yellow cheese, and we thought perhaps that would convince him not to go. But it did not work. Sometimes I believe there was some physical effort to hold him back and prevent him from escaping, but he was stronger than us. And so ultimately, when all of those efforts failed, I came up with a much better solution, which was to just go with him. This was one of the best decisions of my life, because it led to a lifetime not only of learning and valuing history and the excitement of collecting, but a lifetime of adventures with my dad. Traveling to shows, traveling for research, getting together to write a book, articles, presentations, book chapter, and of course, despite my generally being a vegetarian, eating fantastic steak at all of these places. And amazingly, we got to advance the collector spirit further by welcoming my Leonardo and Momo, too, who have both jumped right in. I am so lucky to have had this relationship and to have someone so big and yet so gentle in my life. My dad, Doc, Steve, Grandpa Steve, is a power in the world. He's a tenacious force of nature and enthusiasm that we have all gotten to experience. It's an interesting thing to grow up with a father who is also a legend. On the one hand, as you have all seen, he was so very feisty. He would fight for whatever he thought was right, particularly if it involved advocating for his students or his program. I'm sorry, David, I think you've dealt with that a lot. He loved telling stories about the fights he won. He also took such joy from debate itself. Important things, unimportant things, it's possible that I might have inherited that trait. And at times, he and I would be into arguing whatever topic it was so vehemently and for so long that our family would just slowly, quietly leave the room and go to bed. And even though he was, as I might be, incredibly stubborn, he was also able to debate because he was truly curious. He respected opposing views and was able to learn and even change his mind, and sometimes even admit that he had changed his mind. But my dad was also deeply tender. He was nostalgic for his times in Brooklyn and even took several groups of students to New York to show them how he grew up, with some help from my Aunt Audrey, who acquiesced to his many nostalgic food demands. He was very connected to his family. Even though we lived so far away, he stayed close to them and helped develop a closeness for all of us, despite the miles between New York and Iowa, and now New Jersey. And Boston, I should mention. He also really loved his students and wanted for them to have every opportunity and then to become people who would create opportunities for others. And he loved getting gifts for all of us, my mom especially, that would be meaningful and convey that he saw us and our interests, whether they aligned with his or not. And he loved sentimental shows and movies, and certainly Field of Dreams has been referenced, where he would always ask people which scene made them cry the most, and he would always cry in that movie. He also loved telling stories, and we all especially loved the repeat stories, sometimes slightly exaggerated over time, like when he went, I'll call it skiing, and ended out rolling down the mountain, the miles per hour going up every time he told the tale. That was with Cousin Amy. Or telling the kids about our first sabbatical in Europe. They were laughing hysterically as he kept claiming that we had more and more suitcases with every step we took on the trip. He could capture a room with a well-told story, be it a personal one, usually a fight he had won, or a piece of history that he thought should be shared. And he just generally loved sharing his enthusiasm. He loved physics, so he wanted his students to really understand it, to certainly never sleep through a class, but more so to have hands-on experience in research and to really understand what they were doing and why they were doing it. The same is true with everything he loved. He wanted you to hold the paper money in your hand so you could feel that it was really a witness to history. He wanted you to be at the Colonel's game, certainly long before the first pitch, so you could smell the smells and hear the sounds and enjoy, as I hope many of you have, the best hot dog in baseball. And when he got a delivery of pickles from New York, he would walk up and down the halls of Peterson to give a taste to whoever he found. A real pickle. A real pickle, everybody. Although I know he had love for everyone in this room and online, I must point out that he was especially excited to share these things with his 4 grandchildren, as well as to share in their interests in return. Cough, cough, roller coasters. Another essential quote of his is, "You've got to live a little." This would be said if we raised our eyebrows at, say, a midnight snack of a piece of dark chocolate with whipped cream on it, or having an entire pizza as a quote-unquote appetizer, or perhaps the time he ordered chocolate pie as his dinner in front of my highly impressionable children, who have not and will not ever forget it. See, buddy, I told you I would fit it in. Well, he recently amended that quote to, "You've got to live a lot." And Dad, you did. Your travels, your adventures, your legacy in physics and numismatics, your stories. I know his big fear in retiring was the worry about legacy. He wanted to know that undergraduate research would continue. And I think, in fact, what he wanted to know was that it would grow. I believe that this will happen because of all the groundwork he laid to make it so. But I also believe that his legacy will be insistent in all the areas he touched. He has proudly mentored so many of us and helped us become mentors and forces for good and learning. And so to circle back to that first quote, I would have to argue that I think we're all very lucky. Thank you.
I knew that there was no way I could follow all these people, and so I did not write a speech. I just want to say that through these weeks, which have been the worst of my life, you all have made me be able to say, as Lou Gehrig did, except I'm the most luckiest, I am the luckiest woman alive, and I thank you for coming from everywhere, for all the supportive tributes, and I just feel the love, and I know I'm going to make it, even though I'm lonely because of all of you. Thank you.
Wow. What more really is there to say about the wonderful Steve Feller? I'm going to try and add a few highlights, but we have already heard so much about who he truly was. Steve was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1951 to Morris and B. Feller. They lived in a small co-op apartment with only 2 bedrooms for the 5 of them, his parents and his older brother Ben and his sister Audrey. But it was always a welcoming and open home despite its size. He was a typical hooligan Brooklynite, playing stickball and poker with his friends, eating pizza and watching baseball. He also used to go up to Utica in the summer to visit his grandmother. It was here when he was a freshman in high school that he first met Barbara. The 2 of them became quick friends, writing letters to each other daily, maintaining a long-distance relationship till college. They finally married in 1971. Steve was only 20 years old at the time, still working on his first degree. Barbara was a little older, but I won't give away by how much. They delayed having children because Barbara was cautioned by some family and some of Steve's teachers not to distract him from finishing his graduate work. Still, it didn't take too long for their own children to arrive. It turns out Barbara was pregnant, though she didn't know it yet, when they moved here to Cedar Rapids, the city that would become their home, ongoing for the next 46 years, and still going. Heidi and Ray were both born here, Steve and Barbara's biological children. But Steve also raised many, many disciples here in Cedar Rapids. So many students who were all treated like family. They ate at his home, went on international trips and conventions with him, studied and learned and grew, and never forgot, nor will they ever forget, Steve's mentorship and his kindness. In the first chapter of the Pirkei Avot, a section of the Talmud, we are taught, Moses received Torah at Sinai and transmitted it to Joshua, and Joshua to the elders, and the elders to the prophets, and the prophets to the men of the great assembly. And they said 3 things: be patient, raise many disciples, and make a fence around the Torah. Steve was an exemplar of 2 of these, and he blatantly and proudly flaunted the other. Truly, Steve was a patient man. He was sweet and kind and genuinely present when he was with you. Also, truly, he was a teacher at heart. He knew early on that teaching was his calling, and he picked a job that gave him the best opportunity to be a teacher first, and he was great at it. Putting a fence around the Torah is an idiom that means if the Torah prohibits something like don't cross this particular line, then we humans should put a fence yards away from the line so that we can never get close to it. In practical terms, it's one of the reasons we have so many laws about kashrut, about the food we eat. Separate plates and utensils, separate refrigerators, prohibited foods. Steve was raised in this kind of home, and he rebelled from it. He loved his food, all food, kosher or not. He loved cooking and sharing meals. He loved pizza and hot dogs, and he was one of our all-time great latke makers. Every year at Temple, he and Brian Cohen would make latkes for our dinner, making hundreds of latkes every night when they would do it. They would leave the synagogue smelling of oil for weeks, but it was always a wonderful meal. There is, of course, so much more we could talk about. His connection to Judaism in the synagogue. He was a past president of Temple Judah. His love of board games. His love of the New York Yankees, whom I won't curse today, only for him. His cuddliness, his kindness, even his stubbornness. But we've heard a lot about Steve now, and his memory will be with us forever. He is survived by his sister Audrey, his wife of 54 years, Barbara, his daughters Heidi and Ray, his son-in-law Howard, and his grandchildren Max, Leonardo, Isaac, and Momo, whom he loved and adored. We say goodbye to Steve Feller, a giant in his field, a mensch in life. Zichrono livracha. May his memory always bring us blessing. And let us say, Amen. O God, you gave us loved ones and make them the strength of our life, the light of our eyes. They depart and leave us bereft on a lonely way, but you are the living fountain from which our healing flows. To you, the stricken look for comfort and the sorrow-laden for consolation. O God, we see life as through windows that open on eternity. We see that love endures and the soul endures as you, O God, endure forever. We see that the years are more than grass that withers, more than flowers that fade. They weave a timeless pattern in a world that is the dwelling place of your love and glory. I'm going to ask you now to please rise as we hear El Malei Rachamim on behalf of Steve Feller. El Malei Rachamim shochein bamromim hamsei menucha nechona tachat kanvei hashchina im kedoshim utehorim kezor harakiya mazirim et nishmat Shlomo Avraham ben Moshe shehalach lolamo Baal harachamim yastirehu beseter kenafav leolamim v'yitzrur b'yitzrur hachayim et nishmato Aronahu nachalato v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Steve Feller, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. This concludes our service here in Sinclair Auditorium. In just a moment, I'm going to invite the pallbearers up to come up here on stage, and they will usher Steve out through the stage door here over on my right. If you would give a moment, the family is then going to exit over here off to their left, stage right, through the doors and go to their cars. Anybody else that would like to join us in the procession, you can go out to your cars then after the family is left and process over to Ibn Israel Cemetery for burial. You can also find your own way there if you just go to your cars and want to join us there. If you don't join us for burial, you are more than welcome to join the family at Barbara and Steve's home on Saturday evening, Sunday evening, and Monday evening at 5:30. The family will be sitting Shiva, so anybody can come those nights as well. Thank you all for being here. It means so much to have you here for the family. When you have a chance to see them, please share a story that you have of Steve. It is the stories that will keep him alive in our hearts and our minds going forward. It is the stories that make him eternal. Let me invite up Howard Berger, Mark Berman, Michael Berman, Sarah Blair, Mark Handler, and Meredith Korkidis to please come usher Steve.